Have you ever thought to yourself, hey, I should sink over 600 hours of my life into getting really good at a game that nobody cares about and is destined to die? No? Well, you're missing out, because I did just that with the online virtual third-person shooter tactical video game known as Rogue Company. Now, before we get into this wonderful video game, that by the way, can't even be played in its current state through the Epic Games launcher, please let me first introduce myself. My name is Brenden, and I absolutely adore playing shitty games.
What the hell did you just say?
This whole fiasco started in September of 2020 and was meant to be a CSGO-inspired hero shooter with combat mechanics similar to Star Wars Battlefront or Uncharted Online. I was introduced to it by a close friend at the time who was looking for a cross-play game we could enjoy together since I had recently switched from console to PC. Believe it or not, this was the game that I learned keyboard and mouse on. Despite controller having straight up clear advantages like overtuned aim assist and a valuable 360-degree movement capability, I challenged myself to play until I hit Rogue, which, in hindsight, was mostly just a I play the game too much badge, but I was a teenager, and time was more expendable back then. I think the main reason I liked this game as much as I did and as fast as I did was because they introduced a perfect medley for my taste in games at the time. The characters had unique and skillful abilities, the fidgety shoulder switching mechanic reminded me of playing Uncharted as a kid, and at the time, it was a more approachable bomb defusal simulator than CSGO or Valorant. Even though I play, and much prefer those titles now, this game will always stick with me, like the clapped out Honda Civic you drive to get through high school. It was there, reliable, and fun, and it got me from A to B on my keyboard journey. Another aspect I really enjoyed was the unique approach to agents, or rogues as they called them. Basically, each character had a passive ability and then an active signature ability, along with two pieces of utility that could be either a grenade, a smoke, a landmine, etc., etc. But it always felt like there was something new you could do in the game. With all that being said, Rogue Company clearly separated itself from games like Valorant with its unique movement style and clear potential to be the next third-person tactical shooter. Oh, wow, I'm bad, but that guy was almost worse. So, I started my journey with the healer Saint, and over time, I transitioned into Vi and Phantom, and a little bit of Fixer here and there. Cause, you see, every time a new rogue dropped, it kind of broke the game. As the game developed, and the player base had time to decide who were the best and the worst of the rogues, quickly, people found that Vi, with her incredible zoning abilities, basically having access to 3 mollies and maybe a 4th every round, was at the top of that meta. Essentially, throughout the entire lifespan of this game, Vi has been at the top of the meta. Now, I didn't play a lot of the recent patches before I lost access, although I did get on a bit, and I know they changed her ability a bit, away from necessarily stealing health to giving her shield or something. I don't really understand. I'll probably pop up a graphic on the screen that explains it better, but she got some changes. She didn't really pair too well with Dahlia when Dahlia got to the meta, which I'll cover later, but just know Vi was way too strong in her current state when the game first came out. It was just ridiculous the amount you could get away with. And the Nightshade, which was her signature rifle, was also an incredible option once they actually allowed the other rogues to use the entirety of the rifle class. Although, on Vi, a lot of people transitioned into using Seeker's weapon, which I'll pop up on the screen right here, because when you could deal damage to people at such a high amount after stealing their health, it was kind of better than being able to shoot faster than them, which is what the Nightshade was able to do. But I digress. Just know, Vi, integral part of this video game. In fact, it got so bad in certain levels of tournament play that most teams ran a Scorch and a Vi so that the Scorch could run through the mollies, although she wasn't immune to the poison because there was nobody who could get around the poison. But she was immune to the mollies, and that made for options for post plant that were a little more viable and options for taking space that were a little easier than what a Lancer or a Ronin could necessarily accomplish at that time. Overall though, this was a meta full of zoning abilities. If you didn't have mollies on your team and the other team did, I mean, it was pretty unlikely that you were going to be able to take space, at least as efficiently as they could. Now, to compare this to a game like CSGO, where mollies are an integral part of that meta as well, there are clear counters in that game, such as throwing a smoke on the molly to get rid of it if you're in a sticky situation. In this game, you basically had to have a Scorch or a Scorch paired with a Dahlia to get past what Vi, Dallas, and other zoning ability characters could offer at the time. And comparing this more Call of Duty-like time to kill, where you can't just really one-tap an enemy with an AK or a Vandal, it made for some interesting dynamics where if your Vi was able to steal enough health from the other team early on, they really didn't have a chance of beating you in one-on-ones. They'd really have to rely on either shooting you from behind and getting a damage advantage, or they would have to get a jump on you with their own Vi by taking your health back and leveling out the playing field. Overall, the general consensus of the community, especially at the higher levels of play, was that Vi, yes, was very strong, but maybe not game-breaking, especially with the introduction of the next rogue I'm about to talk about, and her name is Dahlia.
I'm gaming. Oh, I'm even more insane.
I'ma take a bougie ass to Rodale and then let her pick up whatever she want. CC Gucci Hippo, take her whatever she want. She pissed me off somehow, she still get whatever she want.
Dahlia was a unique addition to the Rogue Company cast. She could pair with a teammate, taking their passive ability, and she could also pick them up within 30 meters of where they went down. Pair this with a broken lifeline perk that could get somebody up within 2 seconds, and you have a recipe for extreme success, especially at the highest levels of play. Lancer was often Dahlia's first thought of teammate. She had a passive ability where she could roll to reload, which granted extra options for entering sites efficiently. In this capacity, Dahlia was used as a pacing tool, where she could enter sites with Lancer, along with support her when she's on her ult routes, which allowed her to go silently and quickly behind enemy lines. As the meta developed and more people caught on to this playstyle, Scorch often became her next option, especially in pro and tournament play. This kind of goes back to the original Vi meta, where the mollies were very strong, but Dahlia kind of made that a little better, because when you paired with a Scorch, you would have 2 options to go through mollies, and you could get up your other option very quickly if they were to go down, which meant, in theory, you could have, 3 to 4 lives on your team that didn't really care about mollies, which was very important. During this time, and a little bit after Dahlia's release, we saw Fixer and Trench come under the spotlight. Fixer was a newer rogue that could see through smokes and had a double barrel sniper that could shoot rapidly in succession. Very busted. I'll touch on him in a second. But oftentimes, team comps would look something like this during this era. You would have a Fixer, a Dahlia, a Vi, and a Scorch. And that was pretty much true for most, if not all, maps. I mean, Fixer gave you smokes, a stupid ability that shouldn't have existed. Ew, yikes, why? Vi and Scorch would team up to deny space from the enemy and control the pacing of how people moved around the map. Scorch, with her incredibly strong flaming bullets, could basically melt you in about 1 to 2 shots less. And if you were using her double barrel shotgun, you could basically get one-tapped even if you had shield at that time, because there were no 150, 175, none of that. you could get one-tapped by an ulted Scorch. So picture this. You have a guy who can see through smokes, can one-tap you, but can also reliably two-tap you, has the best pistol in the game and C4, which I'll probably touch on in another video if we ever come back to this game, but the utility was insane, especially C4. Like, opposed for mollies, C4 was very, very good. But then you also had 2 denial tools, a pace setter that could also one-tap you, and had access to shield, and could reload their gun for killing you. So that was a thing. And you also had a flexible agent who could pair to both your Scorch or your Fixer, depending on your playstyle, because there were also ideas where people would pair with Fixer and then you had the slow on your bullets with the DMR, and that way you could get people stuck in those mollies. And I mean, it wasn't the strongest, but it was definitely a thing, and it was a wild card to some teams that were really looking to breach, but didn't really have the tools to do so forcefully. And that's where Fixer comes in. By being able to throw large smokes onto the field that you can basically just shoot people in the head through for free. I mean, like, there was not really a counter other than maybe like a Talon reveal. I don't even know if Talon could reveal at that time. I think it was just on the minimap, but I guess a Dallas reveal if you're lucky, because it was the closest one to you. There was just so much variability in this gameplay, and it really created a lot of chaos in the meta. And that's where Trench came into play. You see, Trench had this special passive where he could have 2 times whatever his granted utility slots were. So oftentimes that was going to be a landmine, or it was going to be an ABS system, which was basically a trophy system that would block utility. And when upgraded, it could block 2 pieces of utility. So on certain maps, you know, you're denying entire Dima ults for like the heavy breacher styles, but more importantly, sometimes you'll catch a Fixer smoke, and that whole playstyle gets shut down. Pair that with some barbed wire that is basically just Vi poison that doesn't take their health permanently, you got a pretty good recipe for success. I mean, he had the same DMR Dahlia had. But at the end of the day, the devs kind of learned their lesson during this era. There were a lot of changes that happened after they lost a lot of players, and I mean, Fixer was still really good, kind of like Vi, forever. I mean, it's really hard to change a dude who can see through smokes and make him bad, you know? And the same was true for Dahlia. I mean, being able to pair to another rogue and pick them up remotely, I mean, Saint's good, but like 2 seconds on top of that? To be completely real though, this was definitely the era that I had some of the most fun playing. I mean, really, it was just chaos. And there were a lot of options that were really fun. But I understand that a lot of people don't like that. And eventually the devs had to learn too. By this point in the game, Mr. Shungite had kind of stepped out of the picture for good. And it was really just up to the community to keep this project alive to the extent that they could. And the developers were aware of this, and they had the same problem. So they added Kestrel. Kestrel was the first Indian rogue added to the game, and she had an ability that was unlike any other. For every enemy that she downed, she would get a buff to her economy that was basically enough to buy 1 advantage round over the opponent. And what I mean by that is that she was getting weapon upgrades, perks, abilities, utility way earlier than whoever was on the other team. When you pair that with a Dahlia, that means you can get Lifeline round 2 pretty consistently, meaning that together you have an economy buff, you have somebody who can res your economy buff character. That economy buff character also, and I forgot to mention this, had one of the best guns in the game at the time. And she had a reliable ability to flush out enemies from corners that were, in the past, hard to get rid of. Mollies were there, but if you could insta-kill somebody and also get rid of an ABS system because it was multiple blasts, that was great. And around this time too, they added Seeker to really put the nail in the coffin for that Fixer meta that they so despised. Seeker had a bow and arrow that would shoot and along its path would reveal any enemy that it passed. It could also bounce off of just about any surface in the game, and if it bounced and then hit you, it had a chance to insta-kill you, as you saw in the very beginning of this video. This bounce effect also applied for his grenades, which made it to where a Seeker paired with a Dahlia, and or Seeker on his own, could pretty much nullify Tenacity, which had been plaguing this game's explosives since the very beginning. I'm not going to get into much past this in the game's life cycle, because honestly I didn't play much past this. A lot of people I knew quit the game around this time. I was kind of feeling like, you know, it lived its time, we tried it, and it just didn't work out. And this is how a lot of the tournament players and streamers and anybody who was somebody in the community was feeling. The game had just gotten stale. It was almost like they tried too hard to make the new rogues exciting and good and playable, and just forgot about everybody else on the roster. And that's not to say they didn't change the other rogues. I mean, during this time, a lot of the intel characters got buffs. I mean, Talon got better, Ronin got better as a info denial tool, and realistically, from a balance perspective, things were on the up and up. It just seemed to be too little too late, and they were starting to transition away from the original vision of the game. Instead of centering new modes around bomb defusal or, you know, tactical shooting gameplay, it was really just an all-out run-and-gun shooter. They introduced King of the Hill, great mode, thought that was good. They introduced Wingman, thought that was good, still had one guy to play with at the time, so that was fun. And they introduced new team deathmatch modes. I mean, there was even like a Battle Royale knockoff that I missed out on. You probably saw on the Vi perks. I think it was called Battle Zone. But in short, beating this dead horse was not going to make it stand up again. And that's where we get to today. I can't even play this game anymore with my current setup that I used to, which was Epic Games Launcher, you know, download it, plug and play, good to go. I don't know about other platforms, but if that's the case on Epic, I mean, that's a huge player base that you're missing just by not having the game work. And I truly feel bad for people like Scott Gandhi, who was the guy in that photo earlier. He put his heart and soul into this game. It just didn't seem like the tools were there. But sometimes, you just gotta let things die. Look, I know this isn't the most in-depth video about this game out there, and I skipped over a lot of just minute details that I didn't think really mattered a whole lot, but this game really meant a lot to me. You saw how many hours I put into this. I obviously enjoyed it. There's nothing really out there that's quite like this, that captured, I think, the third person run and gun style as well as this. It was just disaster after disaster with every new release and every switch up in the meta. Just balancing out the window. Conclusion, you gotta balance your video game. Rogue Company sucks. Wish it didn't. Bye bye. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.